that you always have to educate yourself on. You have to keep learning. You have to see what the blueprint is in your industry. I went in knowing that I was the only black person for my major. So knowing that and being in that classroom, it gave me a different level of drive. You're basically allocating your income. So every 2 weeks you're looking at the income that you're making and you're actually allocating a percentage of that income to certain accounts.
How's it going, guys? Welcome to another episode of Secrets of Silent Success. Today we have the one and only B. Trofort-Wilson. How are you doing this morning, B?
I'm great. How about you?
I'm doing great. I appreciate you for being here, and well, I appreciate you for letting us be here at your studio, right? But no, we'll jump right into it, right?
Yes.
Actually, so we're here at Be Fearless Studios. That's your tagline, your brand. I want to know where Be Fearless comes from and what does that mean to you?
So for me, I come from a Caribbean background. My mom is Bahamian from the Bahamas and my dad's Haitian. So when I decided I want to be a photographer, of course, coming from a Caribbean background, that's not a real job.
Yeah.
And with that, I know a lot of times we have people in our lives that try to give us advice, but what they're really doing is they're putting their fears on us. And so that's how I decided to come up with the name Be Fearless for our studio, and our tagline is Be Fearless and Create, because oftentimes we let fear stop us from everything. And I want to create a space where when you come in here, you can fearlessly create. There's no one stopping you, no one holding you back, and just trying to break those barriers of stopping fear from stopping us from pursuing what our goals and our dreams are.
Gosh, I know you talked about this being daunting. You came out here and like mic drop bar on the first question and answer. Nah, that was a bar right there. You talk about others projecting onto you. I would ask you. You talk about your parents saying, photography is not a real job type of thing. Before we start rolling, we asked if college was necessary, and I always like to say college is not necessarily necessary. So I would ask you, as a graduate from Virginia Commonwealth, do you feel that college was necessary as a creative?
Knowing what I know now, yes and no. So for me, college was one of those things that was engraved to us. When you go to high school, after you go to high school, you graduate, like that's part of becoming an adult. So for me, it was a great experience in terms of, I went to Virginia. I'm originally from Miami, Florida. So I was stretched in a way of being by myself. Well, I have my twin sister, but being away from your parents, learning how to grow, learning how to network and all those different things.
It's cold too.
And listen, cold and brick buildings, total opposite of growing up in Miami. Yeah. But for me, I like the benefit of college because, one, I went in knowing that I was the only black person for my major. So knowing that and being in that classroom, it gave me a different level of drive. And because I come from a sports background, I'm very, very competitive. So I use that as a way to drive me. I was doing internships every single year, although it wasn't required for graduation. I was able to intern with People Magazine, all the local things like that. So for me, college was a benefit because being a college student, you had access to reach out to get internships and do different things like that. I had access to equipment that I couldn't afford, where I was able to utilize the studio, rent the equipment for free, and be able to create with no one stopping me outside of my classroom. So for me, it was beneficial in that way, but the student loan debt wasn't, it's not worth it. And that was kind of how I decided to even come up with creating a studio. At first, I never wanted a studio, but I realized I was part of a magnet program in high school for drawing and photography, and having access to those resources, I want to create a space where it's affordable to provide those same resources for those who can't go to college, who can't study it, and different things like that. And that's how the birth of the studio came about.
No, that definitely makes sense. And so I think that's a great transition point. You talked about having a studio. I know you also do the master class and then the teaching. What's kind of been your journey to monetize and make your passion of photography into your paycheck?
So for me, I realized that, one, as a photographer, you have to be a business person.
Absolutely.
And you have to have multiple streams of business. And I definitely love shooting. Of course, that's one of my biggest things. But during COVID was when I actually realized that a lot of people were reaching out to me, asking for advice, asking if I could teach workshops or do virtual things to their classes. And I was like, who am I? Like, I'm just a little photographer just shooting, you know. But then that's when I realized realized that education was a big thing because there weren't that many people that looked like me in this industry. There weren't that many people that are shooting the way that I'm shooting.
Yeah.
And so that was when I started to have a bigger passion for education and wanted to be able to provide those same resources again for those who can't study it in school or study it in college. So for me, my passion changes a lot because I love shooting, but then the education just started pulling me, and I'm like, I don't want to teach. But then opportunities kept coming. It's like, okay, God, you're giving me this to be a vessel, so I can't be naive. I can't stop doing it. So that's how my passion just started to drive into more sources of income, but also just more sources of providing resources for others.
Awesome, awesome. No, I love that you talk about. Spike Lee says, I didn't find film, film found me. And you probably say, like, I didn't find education. I wasn't even looking for it. If anything, I closed the door on it a couple times, but it still kept coming. Yeah. No, I love that. I would ask you from the business side of things, because if you're like me, you probably didn't take any business classes in college. I know I didn't, right?
I took one.
Okay, so you took one. You got one more than me. You took one, but it's a lot of trial and error, a lot of hardships, a lot of toiling on the business side of it, from just dealing with clients, from dealing with payments from clients, all of that. Tell me a little bit about some of the pitfalls and the lessons learned, right? The L's that you took, but the lessons that you learned in business to help you get to where you are today.
So the biggest thing for me, before I decided to go full freelance, I started interning and getting mentors. And to me, that was the biggest cheat code that I try to tell everyone. If you're trying to get in any industry, find a mentor that's going to be honest with you. And I had mentors like Derek Blanks, Kelly Klein, people that were open and explained to me, this is how money works, this is how credit works, this is how business credit works. And I'm like, wait a minute, like, okay. And, you know, oftentimes there's a lot of people that don't tell those things. So for me, being able to have mentors like that kind of helped me skip past a lot of things in business in terms of like learning about contracts, licensing, things like that. But I think the biggest thing for me, I mean, still with business, you're always going to be learning, you know, and it's something that you always have to educate yourself on. You have to keep learning. You have to see what the blueprint is in your industry. And especially when it comes to photography and licensing and things like that, oftentimes because we're so hungry to start our business, we miss out on all that and we give away so much for free, not realizing that the art that we create is basically real estate, you know, and the art, the way that we monetize it, the way that brands use it, you have to pay for that. And being able to educate yourself and learn, okay, how do I actually send out a correct pitch deck? How do I actually send out a correct invoice or estimate? Am I including all of my things in my contract? So, and you know, you learn the hard way when you realize you shortchange yourself and you made no money after paying everybody else. You know, those are the different things that you learn, but it's also great strategy. I feel like it's part of it. It's part of the journey of learning how to be better in business. And sometimes the hardest things you go through are the things that make you better in business. So there's a lot. I mean, I feel like there's too many lessons to learn in business. But I always say, like, look at the blueprint. You know, there's so much blueprints in every industry, and it just takes time to study it. It takes time to learn it, ask questions, ask the right questions, and don't be afraid to negotiate, especially when it comes to contracts. Oftentimes, I speak with others, and they're just like, well, they said this in the contract, or here was their estimate. Just if you don't like a wording in something, ask them if they can change it. The worst thing that they can say is no. The worst thing they can say is no, but you can't. But don't feel as if just because it's written, if you didn't sign it, it's not set in stone. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
You said a lot of things there, right? And one thing I want to touch on is the financial part of it. You talked about, you know, business credit and getting loans and all that stuff. When I started the podcast, I was really wanting to talk about entrepreneurship and business, starting a business, but I quickly realized that you can't talk about that without talking about the financial side of it. And I really found that, again, it's like I didn't find film found me. I didn't find this financial lane that found me. But one question I would have for you is, what's been some of your tips and tricks from a financial perspective of running a business? Because I know for me, you might have a $30,000 month in January and then a $3,000 month in February, and it's like, hey, you got to learn how to navigate that.
Right.
So what's been some of your tips and tricks from a financial perspective of navigating your business?
So one thing that I started doing a couple years ago was the profit first method. I'm not sure if you ever heard of that.
Yeah, the 5 accounts, right?
The 5 accounts. And when I tell you those 5 accounts have stayed.
But hold on, the audience may not know. So go ahead, give it to us.
So basically what profit first is, it's basically, how do you simplify it? you're basically allocating your income. So every 2 weeks, you're looking at the income that you're making, and you're actually allocating a percentage of that income to certain accounts. So with Profit First, you'll have your operating expense account, your taxes, your profit, your owner's compensation, and
Uncle Sam. Did you say Uncle Sam already? You said taxes?
Yeah. Oh, the income. I didn't count the income.
The income, okay.
Income. So basically, so with that, every 2 weeks, you'll put all of your money, well, you deposit all of your income into your income account. And then every 2 weeks, you will go into that. And based on however you put the percentages in your business, you'll put, let's say, 50% to profit, 10% to taxes, 10% to owners, to operating expense, and 10%. Don't use these percentages. I'm just giving out numbers. Yeah. But I've started to use that method, and it definitely helped me because within our culture, we don't talk about money. Yeah. We don't talk about budgeting. We don't talk about any of those things. And oftentimes, a lot of us don't like to look at our bank accounts. Like, I remember I was at a financial conference a couple years ago, and they asked the audience, raise your hand if whenever you see a bill, your stomach starts to hurt. And then it's like, raise your hand if your stomach starts to hurt whenever you look at your account or whenever you're about to open up your account on your phone. And I realized they talked about you have to have a better relationship with money. And so with that, having that Profit First system, it forces you and holds you accountable where every 2 weeks, you're supposed to go in and look at your bank accounts, and you're seeing where your money's going, how you're utilizing your money, and also paying yourself. You know, oftentimes as entrepreneurs, we don't know how to pay ourselves, or we think that everything that's coming into our business is ours. No, it's not. You know, and so the Profit First system for me has helped me, one, understand how much money I am making sure that I'm allocating the correct funds to my operating expenses to make sure that our overhead is covered, making sure that I'm paying myself, making sure that money's put aside for Uncle Sam. So when tax time come around, you're not scared or like, okay, where's this money going to come from? I already have all that allocated over there. So the Profit First system for me has been a game changer. With even some of the people who work with me at the studio, I started educating them with that. And it's just one of those things, again, where you have to have a better relationship with looking at your bank account. You have to have a better relationship with how to manage your money. Because like you said, some months is up and some months is down. Or months, plural, is down.
Or the whole year of 2020 is down.
Like, you know, this slight recession where Ibn was talking about. But even with that, it's also just being able to understand and be responsible with your funds, being responsible with your money. Because, again, as entrepreneurs, social media makes it seem like everyone's just living lavish and spending money crazy. They're really not. You know, it's just a highlight reel, and you have to be able to manage your money, spend what you can afford to spend. Don't spend just to impress somebody else. So.
Yeah. If you don't mind, I would love to go a little more granular on your Profit First method, because I've heard several guests on the podcast do it several different ways. So I'm always like, okay, well, this book I need to go read it myself, but everybody's giving out these gems. So a couple questions I would ask is, do you physically have 5 different accounts with your bank, or are you just having like a spreadsheet, but all of the income is in one account? And then without giving numbers, thinking about percentages, if you say, hey, I'm doing 30% of the percentage to operating costs, what's that percentage and what's the rationale behind the percentage?
Gotcha. So I do actually have 5 separate accounts for both my photography business and for my studio business.
Wow.
So I have them split because I didn't want them to overlap, and I want to be able to see how much the studio's making, how much I am making as a photographer.
And those are 2 different LLCs?
And 2 different LLCs, 2 different banks. Shout out to Wells Fargo and Bank of America. I have a love-hate relationship for both of y'all. But
facts,
you know,
well, everybody, PNC, Chase, we're not going to get sponsored, but love-hate relationship with all of them.
Right. So I have 2 separate LLCs for my studio and for my photography business. I have 5 different accounts for each of them at 2 different banks. And with that, the great thing with Profit First is you make it true to you. So like my first couple of months, I had my operating expense at 50% on both of them. And then I was able to determine, okay, after the next couple of months, going over my how much I was actually spending in my operating expenses, okay, do I need to increase its percentage or do I need to decrease it? So it's one of those things where, again, and then I have a spreadsheet. So I have a spreadsheet where every single month where I'm able to go into my photography business spreadsheet or my studio business, and I'll literally have a breakdown where I just put in my income for that 2 weeks and it'll automatically calculate the percentages for me.
Yep.
So I know what money needs to be transferred, but I also have documentation so I can look at it over the course of the year to see, okay, we're good here, okay, we're a little bit low here, and different things like that. So I have both the 5 accounts and I still have a spreadsheet just to be able to have something to look over. And I realized I was becoming an adult when I started loving spreadsheets.
Yeah,
I realized I was becoming an adult when I started loving organization. But it definitely makes your life simpler. It's made my life so much simpler. And it's, for me, a great way just to be able to know, again, where my money's going. If I'm making money, if I'm not making money, if we need to change something up, or if we need to just do things different.
So the second part of the question is looking at the percentage, right? So let's use operating costs. So you talked about having 50% at first, and then going through and working on that a little bit to match what the actual pattern of spending and operating was. Where did that initial 50% come from? And then how did you look at patterns and figure out what was a percentage that you actually wanted to allocate to operating costs? So
with the 50%, I started kind of with, the book gives you some numbers to start with. So I kind of started there, and then I also knew that, especially with our studio, we have a higher overhead than my photography business because we have 2 studios, we have all these different things that we have to pay for. So I started with that number, and then the number increased when I realized, okay, of course, every year your lease increases, everything increases, you know, electricity, gas, all those different things. So based on that, like even knowing, like during the winter time, our electricity bill is higher because of heat, you know, so different things like that was how I realized, okay, I actually need to put more money aside or allocate more money to operating expenses just to be able to cover those costs. So it started with like 50%, and then it just started to increase. But then the whole thing with Profit First is you want to be able to increase your numbers, but then decrease the numbers over time. So figuring out, okay, if we're spending too much for our operating expenses, how can we decrease this percentage? What things can we cut? What things are necessary for your business? And you know, oftentimes there's too many subscriptions out here that we all are signed up to, and it's just like, I like it, but I don't need it, you know? So that also helped us go back in and look at our numbers and see, okay, what can we cut? What are we using? What aren't we using? How can I get a discount on Adobe Create? You know, just different little things like that, just to be able to decrease that number.
Knowing that you have a concentration in sports photography, kind of what's your background and what's your story of how you got into sports photography?
So I played basketball growing up. I wanted to play in the NBA. I was a loving basketball movie lover. Was going to marry a basketball player, had that whole life story. It did not happen. And so actually in high school, I was in the major for photography and for drawing and art, and me and the photography teacher didn't get along. No, me and the drawing teacher didn't get along, so I started focusing more on photography.
Got it.
And when it came down to college, I knew that I was good at photography, so I was like, let me just study it. I didn't know where it was going to take me, what it looked like, what the career would actually look like. And when I got to college, my professor was like, photograph what you're passionate about, photograph what you love. And I loved sports. I loved playing basketball. I played intramural in college to stay in shape because them girls was too big to play on the team. But I just started to have a passion for, okay, if I want to stay in the game or stay a part of the game, I can use my camera as a tool. So with that, I started interning with the sports photographer for VCU that shot all the beautiful billboards, did the sports, and just started studying like photographers that shot for ESPN. And then that was when I realized, like, hey, this is actually a career you can actually move into. So although VCU's curriculum was focused on conceptual art and shooting art for museums and things like that, on the side, because we had access to all those resources, I was finding players at the school like, hey, can you come to the studio and do a photo shoot session? And from there, I just started just to take it up a notch. I was always shooting athletes, and then moved to Atlanta and just started started freelancing with NBA TV, editing NBA highlights. And just from there, just started networking and just learning, okay, I love sports, but how can I actually turn it into a career? How can I actually start getting paid for it? And then that's how everything just started falling in place. Just consistency, working with local trainers, meeting athletes, and then now shooting for Atlanta Falcons, Jacksonville Jaguars, Atlanta Dream, Charlotte FC. It's just been amazing.
No, that is awesome. That is awesome. And what I love about that, I can't remember the speaker that said this, but he was like, oftentimes people are looking for their passion and their career path and what is going to fulfill them. And sometimes you just go with what fits.
Right.
And so you were in that photography class, you're like, I'm just going to major in this, and it just kind of fit. Well, I just kind of like sports. And if you are able to do what fits consistently, you can actually monetize to build a career and find fulfillment, which sounds like you've done, which is awesome.
Definitely. I always get the best seat in the house. So
there you go. There you go. One thing I do want to talk about, so media in general is male dominated, right? But sports media is all male. So you're I'm a minority too, right? I'm a black person, but you're a double minority, right?
Yes.
So black and a woman. Talk to me about your experience in the industry. I even know when you come on our set, like we try to make it diverse, but you're still, last year was still the only woman shooter there. What's kind of been your experience, and how are you maybe overcoming some of those systemic and systematic challenges?
It's been a challenge. I feel like now it's not as bad because, you know, there's more conversations around it. But when I first started, I started working with Kelly Klein, who was a woman based here in Atlanta, who I studied her in college. She was shooting campaigns for Under Armour. So when I moved to Atlanta, I was like, I'm working with her. And I kind of stalked her to finally get an opportunity to work with her. But working with her, the first job I did with her was I think it was Under Armour and Adidas Summer League. And we were the only women. Wow. And being in that environment, I'm fresh out of college, like naive to the world, naive to everything. And it was very, very hard for me at first, because having to, not just be the only woman in that environment, but then being the only black woman in that environment behind the camera, and then being a woman where you're young and you're getting all these comments from men, and trying to figure out how to deal with it in a professional way, because I'm from Miami. Like, I'm ready to take, you said what? And you can't do that in business, you know? And I remember me and Kelly had a lot of conversations over dinner where I'm like, okay, how do you deal with this? How do you get past it? Or how do you carry yourself? And how to do, different things like that. And luckily I had someone like that in my corner to basically hold my hand through that and show me how to, not take things personal, show me how to carry myself. And even like whenever, I'm a very nice, bubbly person, but when it comes to work, I realize you can't smile all the time, which is sad, because if you smile, they think that you're flirting. And it's like, I'm just trying to be nice. I'm trying to be cordial. And I had to learn it's okay to be more firm. It's okay to be more serious. And to get to demand that respect, you have to do that. And even 2 years ago, me and my friends were just talking about this. We were shooting track and field world championships that was in Oregon. And it was a group of black women photographers, and we were all there. And most of the white men were like, oh, you guys must be interns. Wow. And it's like, it's me, it's a photographer who shoots for the NBA. Like, it's people who have a great catalog, but because they're not used to seeing us, they were very upset with it. And then they were upset with the access that we got, because the athletes knew us because we've been around this industry for a while. So the athletes were giving us like all these exclusive things. And it was one of those things where we just started to remember, like, man, like, they're not used to seeing us, and they're mad that we're here. And then now that we're here, we're shaking things up, and they don't like that. But it needs to happen. When you're looking at sports, the majority of people who are on the field look like us, but the people who are covering it don't look like us. And the questions that you're asking, you can tell that they don't know us. So it's really it's been a great challenge, but for me, I find a lot of value in being able to talk with young photographers and teach them how to carry themselves. I have like some mentees that shoot in college, and I'm like, even with the players, watch your relationship with them. You can't be too friendly, because if one person says something, even if it's not true, that can hurt your career.
Absolutely.
And just learning how to protect yourself, how to value yourself. And how to show them that you belong in the space. They can't deny it once they see the art. So
Facts. Absolutely. No, I love all of that. That was all great gems for sure. So this is called the Secrets of Silent Success podcast. So I would ask you, B, what is your secret to success?
My secret to success is having an amazing village, having amazing mentors, and following the learning the blueprint, and then following it.
Cool. We'll leave it right there. Hopefully that wasn't too painful for you.
No, it was great.
I appreciate you.